Hello students, Mr. Young here with Chapter 20, Lesson 4. It is called Catholics and Protestants. So today's lesson is mostly about, religious wars. I think in this day and age, religious wars are a little harder for us to understand. Two totally different religions are culturally very different, so those differences can facilitate conflict, I suppose. But religious wars that we're going to talk about are Catholics versus Protestant, which in the grand scheme of things aren't really all that different, so it's a little harder to grasp, even for me. But we're going to talk all about it today. Some little known conflicts for sure, things that I wasn't too familiar with. So, before we get to the wars, we have the Catholic Reformation. So in the 15 and 1600s, you saw an effort by the Catholic Church to reform itself in order to halt the spread of Protestantism. It was all started by Martin Luther, and this time was called the Catholic Reformation. So this effort was headed by Pope Paul II and a council that he met with between the years 1545 and 1563. This council met on occasion and sought to end church abuses like the selling of indulgences. The council cracked down on the behavior of priests and bishops, basically giving them a strict set of rules to live by. They also set up seminary schools where the priests were educated. This was called the Council of Trent because they met in Trent. So there were also efforts to gain back Catholics lost to the Protestants. An order was created by the Spanish noble Ignatius called the Society of Jesus, mostly known as Jesuits. The Jesuits taught and preached in an effort to get Protestants to come back to the Roman Catholic Church. Another Catholic reformer was Teresa of Avila. She was a Spanish nun. She was well known for her spiritual and religious writings. There she is, the dove in the writing. Alright, Catholic Spain. So Spain was a united country. Remember, we had King Ferdinand and Isabella. Ferdinand was of Aragon, Isabella of Castile. They got married, and they became one country that was Spain. And they were very staunch Catholics. Even at the height of the Protestant Reformation, Protestantism never really took off in Spain. It was like a stronghold of Catholicism. Spain's rulers pressured any non-Catholics, so any Jews, Protestants, or Muslims, to basically convert or leave. They were given this ultimatum eventually. And even if they were converted, they were still eyed with suspicion. Ferdinand and Isabella eyed whole Protestant countries with suspicion. To ensure that all were doing as they should be, the Spanish Inquisition was created. It was a sort of court system that rooted out and punished heresy or non-Catholic teachings. They would torture the accused until they admitted to their guilt. No one, not even the Pope, could stop the Spanish Inquisition from killing around 2,000 Spaniards. I've seen it said up to 5,000, so I'm not sure what the exact numbers are. But the Spanish Inquisition is known for their brutality and torture. Alright, now the religious wars. Western Europe had basically been split by religion. You had Northern Europe was Protestant, with the Protestant stronghold being Britain. And Spain was a stronghold for what was mostly Southern Europe, Catholic Southern Europe. So this was going to cause problems, this north-south divide. For example, Spain, being Catholic, was none too pleased when the Protestant Dutch rebelled against Spanish rule. And this rebellion was supported by Queen Elizabeth of England. How did she support it? Well, she was allowing English privateers, basically like government-sanctioned pirates, to attack Spanish ships. King Philip II of Spain was pretty angry about this. I believe King Philip was the great-grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella. He's pretty angry about this and assembled a massive naval fleet to go invade England. It was called the Spanish Armada. The short of this is that it failed. The Spanish ships were massive and had many cannons, but they were outmaneuvered by the smaller English vessels within the narrow English Channel. There was also a pretty bad storm that scattered the Spanish Armada. As a result, the Spanish Armada was forced to retreat back to Spain, and after this, everyone viewed England a little differently. They were not to be trifled with. They have conflicts in France as well. So around the same time, you have Spain fighting England. Problems were arising in France. Much of the population was Catholic, but there was a growing number of the nobility that were becoming Protestants. A specific sect of Protestants that we talked about, the Calvinists. Remember, they were all about predetermination. In France, however, they weren't called Calvinists. They were called Huguenots. So these Huguenots, many of these nobles, wanted to weaken the king. They wanted more power for nobles. We've talked about this constant power struggle between the nobility and the king in multiple countries. So the king was Catholic, and the nobles, a lot of nobles were Huguenots. And I lost my space. Okay, in part, they wanted to rebel against the king so that they could practice and worship more freely. This was direct contradiction of what King Henry II wanted. He wanted a stronger federal government, so the nobles want less central government. The king wants more central government, so there's going to be a conflict. Then King Henry suddenly dies in 1559, and then his son, Francis II, dies the very next year. And that leaves the next son, Charles, who's only 10 years old, as the heir to the throne. So it was the Queen who was in charge for a little while, Queen Catherine de' Medici, the daughter of Lorenzo de' Medici, the guy who runs all of Florence in Italy. So very powerful woman, very powerful family and friends. So she was going to rule until Charles was old enough. While she was in charge, civil war broke out between the Huguenots and the Catholics. She tried to play both sides, but ended up letting some Catholics execute some of the top dog Huguenots within the city of Paris. Catholics were revolting, Protestants were revolting. They started to flee the country. It was a real mess. You've got this picture down here called the Massacre of the Huguenots. What Huguenots did not run away from the country sort of centered around the last sort of powerful Huguenot, who was not Prince Henry. He was a noble, Henry of Navarre. And Henry of Navarre was in part powerful because he was actually in line for succession of the throne. And he did, in fact, become the King of France. He basically inherited this civil war mess. In order to unite the country, with the country being, for the most part, Catholic, he converted to Catholicism. And then to get the battling to stop, he signed what was called the Edict of Nantes, which made Catholicism the official religion of France, but allowed the Huguenots to worship freely. Alright, we end up with the 30 Years' War, something I don't know much about, but it was a nasty debacle that took place mostly within the Holy Roman Empire, and multiple countries partook. Protestant nobles in Bohemia rebelled against their Catholic king. Protestant nobles from Germany, we said northern Germany was Protestant, southern Germany was Catholic, so a split country. Some Protestant nobles from Germany joined the fray, and then the war spread into Germany. The whole thing really got out of control. It lasted 30 years, 1618 to 1648. Sweden, Denmark sent troops in to support the Protestants. Spain, being the staunch Catholics that they are, and the Holy Roman Empire sent troops to help the Catholics. And a lot of Europe burned in this war. What started as a religious war ended up becoming political and territorial, all kind of under the guise of this impetus of religion. In 1643, the Holy Roman Emperor asked for peace. They finally got it in 1648. It was called the Peace of Westphalia, and it was signed by all the warring nations, ending the war. Spain ended up coming out weakened out of this war, as did the Holy Roman Empire, and France, actually being a Catholic country, had sided with the Protestants in order to gain some power over their neighbors. And I guess it worked, because Spain came out of the fray basically a major world power. And that is our lesson for the day. Some soldiers from the 30 Years' War. It was a very strange time in weaponry, because you started to have spears, but you also had musketeers and guns and stuff. interesting times. Something I would like to read more about myself. So this is your basic 10-point quiz, 2 attempts. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.